Hello, welcome to another video by LSX Engines, Tuning and Marine. In this video I'm installing a 5.7 Mercruiser V8 back into about a 25-foot boat. And all I've done so far is obviously lower the engine into the bilge, but we've lowered the engine onto the rear motor mounts, put the two bolts in, the front motor mounts, and I've aligned it. It was already aligned because I did not, if you don't disturb these the front lower nuts and washers, it should be aligned when you put it back in. So that's what happened. We just set the motor back in and checked the alignment, and it was good right from the start. So that was a good thing there. Probably about 50% of the time it's not necessarily the case, and if that's true, then it means it wasn't aligned when I took it apart. So like I said, all we've done so far is set the motor in and tighten down the motor mounts and get it aligned, and that's where it's at now. So I'm about to reconnect all the accessories and all the wiring and so forth back on this engine. And if you'll notice, the carburetor's not installed, the distributor cap's not installed. I'll leave that stuff off because it's a little fragile and I don't want the chain whacking it and knocking a piece of it. I've had chains knock the top of the carburetor bolt off, actually break the carburetor. And also the distributor cap can get damaged too. So at this time, I'm gonna start hooking up the accessories. And if you notice, the exhaust manifolds aren't on it. I just find it easier to set it in because you can get access to the bolts on the side, or the mounts on the side to mount it in here. It gives you easy access to the back of the motor, so you get all the wiring done and your water and all that stuff. So what I'm about to do is, first thing I'm going to do is connect up the water hose to the, there's a power steering cooler right back there, and the water connection is right there on the left side of the engine there, or I guess it'll be the starboard side. And make that connection, tighten that up. Then I'll make up my my trim tilt sensor. There's two wires that have like butt connectors, and one's female, one's male, so it's kind of hard to mess them up. Then I'm going to track down all the negative wires and land them on there's studs on either side of the block. There's one over here and one over there, and reattach all the ground wires to those studs. After that, I will reconnect the power steering hoses to the power steering. See what else. And I believe that's about, the red wire right there is your positive. It goes on the starter, the copper terminal on the starter. I will hook up all that. Most of the harness is already on the engine. I've already connected that while I was outside the boat, while I was still in the shop, and so forth. So one thing I've got to do right here on the back, there was an oil pressure switch. That's a switch that keeps your electric fuel pump running once you build up oil pressure, and that switch was too corroded to reinstall. So if you notice, I just jumpered the wires together right there. That's okay as long as I'm in the boat, keep an eye on the oil pressure and making sure it doesn't drop, and keep running, which if it drops, I had a bigger problem. As you noticed, I have not connected the fuel pump because I'm going to methodically start up this engine. The last thing I'll do is connect this fuel pump to put fuel to the engine and everything. Before I put fuel on it, the ignition time will be statically set. Actually, it's already statically set. I may dynamically set it, but I'm going to check for oil pressure with the engine just spinning over on the starter without the plugs in it. Once I get oil pressure from spinning with the starter, then I'll put plugs in it, hook everything up, and crank it up by pouring fuel into the carburetor without the fuel pump hooked up. And that way it'll just fire up on just the fuel. There will be no chance of fuel coming out of the carburetor. In a previous video, I had a problem where I didn't notice it, but the float in the carburetor was stuck, and it poured about a pint of gasoline in a brand new motor. So I had to just stop what I was doing and drain all the oil out. I don't want that to happen again, so I will not be connecting this fuel pump up until I'm ready to start this engine and everything's been checked out. So I'll set the camera down now and start connecting things, and I'll stop at convenient points and tell you what I've done. All right, continuing with the installation of this 5.7 Mercruiser, I want to point out one other thing. Underneath that motor mount is a stainless steel washer with like star-shaped tabs sticking off of it. The purpose of that washer is to keep the bottom nut from rotating and vibrating down and lowering this engine. So you want to bend one of the tangs down against the flat of the nut on the bottom, and the other tang is bent up, and it curls around. If you can barely see it, it curls around up the side of the motor mount. That way it keeps the lower nut from spinning. It mechanically locks the nut from spinning and going down. or up for that matter, I guess. I don't say go up since the weight of the motor's on it, but anyway. So that's washers on both sides, and you need to make sure that's in place before you lower the weight of the motor, because in the process of lowering the weight, or actually when you're aligning, and when you align an engine, lift it up by this ring right here. You do not pick up the entire engine by that ring. It's just for alignment. So I hooked up my engine gantry chain hoist to that ring, lifted it up, took the weight off the washers, spun them around to the right location, and then tighten down the nuts. So at this time, the two side motor mounts are tight and the back motor mounts are tight, and this engine, I checked the alignment and it's perfect. Darn near perfect. And I didn't touch a thing, so it went back in. It was aligned when it came out, it's aligned going back in. So again, at this time I'm going to continue to hook up things, and I'll stop the camera now, but I'll show you at convenient breaking points what I'm hooking up. All right, I've now connected the water hose. This is the water supply from your outboard pump. Connected here to the power steering cooler, and then tighten down that. That's a 5/16. I use a 5/16 socket on a impact driver in low setting. I then connected the two power steering lines. That's the power steering return. It goes from your it goes from here back to your power, or goes from here to your power steering cooler before it goes to your power steering pump. That hose was just already pre-mounted here, and I just connected it here. The power steering supply hose, the high pressure side, I connected here. I had the hose way up here on the front of the motor. I routed it down. It routes down below the motor mount, through there. And then I routed it right up here beside the return right there. I tied them together right there with a wire tie, plastic wire tie, and then brought it over here and connected it to the power steering steering rack. After that, I hooked up ground wires. There was these two ground wires here are landed on a stud under there. I don't know if you can see that. Trying to see where the stud's at there. You can hardly see it, but it was on a stud. Actually, I forgot to put the nuts on there. I'm glad to found this out. It's still loose. And then I have another ground wire over here on this stud. There's a stud right there. That's the main ground wire from your battery, and it doesn't have the nut on it either. We got to finish that up. After that, I connected up this is your trim position sensor. It connects here, and somebody's already pre-wired that up there, so I just reconnected those. I then connected the positive battery cable is connected down here on the starter. That's what provides power. It lands on that copper bolt coming off your starter solenoid, and then you got that little square device is a fuse. It's in a really bad location. If it ever blows, it's hard to get to. But your red wire comes in here. That's the power for the whole boat. It powers the starter, but then through that fuse, it powers all the electrical components in the boat through that fuse right there. And of course, that comes up and goes into your engine harness. And then let's see what else. I removed the chain. I had a shackle connected to this loop here, and just pulled that loose or took that off. On the front, I did not use. This is a hole for lifting, but it put since I had this is a very high boat and I had very little clearance on my engine gantry, I have to, instead of have the chain come straight, very high, I have to have it come like straight back towards the center of the boat. It puts a lot of sideways force on this bracket and it bends it. So instead of using that, I took this bolt out right here, right there, and put in this longer bolt. It's a 3/8 by 16 grade 5 bolt. And if you want to check the pressure of that bolt, the tensile strength of that bolt, I believe, is like, I would say 7,000 pounds. And the shear strength of the bolt is about approximately 60% of that. So 60% of 7,000 is still over 3,000 pounds. So this bolt, holding up the front of this engine, can easily support 3,000 pounds. This whole engine weighs less than 1,000 pounds all total. So that's how I hook up my front chain connection. So I took the chain off and set it aside. So at this time, I'm going to connect the rear boat harness there to the plug here, and then secure that. And after that, I think I'm gonna go ahead and start putting in the exhaust system. All right, continuing with this 5.7 Mercruiser install. I've now installed the exhaust manifold on the port side of the engine. However, I wish I had waited and done it a little bit later. I forgot that there's an oil pressure switch that goes into a fitting down there where on the oil pressure tap. And the original switch was too corroded to reinstall, so I bought this new switch. It's standard oil product or standard motor products. Let's see what the part number is. PS 135, and it's supposed to close when the oil pressure reaches 6 psi or somewhere around there, and then open when it drops. This switch is what shuts off your electric fuel pump when the engine dies. The engine should shut off, or it would already be shut off if the oil pressure dies because of the switch. But I'm saying if you have a malfunction, you lose oil pressure, this switch will not kill the engine. It'll kill your fuel pump, but your engine will keep running because you have fuel in your float bowl. So this time I'm going to try to put this. I got a plug in the fitting down there. I've got to take that plug out. I think it's a 3/16 Allen, and I'm going to reinstall this oil pressure switch in place of it. And then right now I've got the wires jumpered down there, but I'm going to put this in and put the wires on these terminals. All right, I now have the oil pressure switch. You can't really see it. Let me get you a picture of it. It's right down there, right there. I screwed that into a T fitting. There's the oil pressure sending unit. It's on the same T. I put that new switch in and put the wires on. The wires are 1/4 inch male. The wires are 1/4 inch female spades would fit on the male spades on the switch. So the oil switch is now installed, and I'm now about to install the exhaust manifold on the starboard side of the engine. So what I've done already is I put 2 bolts, or studs if you want, one on either end, and I use those to hold the exhaust manifold in place. I'm just going to get the picture of that one. There's that stud, and there's another stud on that end. I use those to hold the manifold in place while I install the other bolts in the center. Then they hold it in place, and I remove the studs and put the end bolts in. Also, in order for the gasket to sit in the right location, if you just let it sit by gravity, the gasket will hang down into the exhaust passage just a little bit and partially block the flow. So to keep the gasket from hanging down, what I do is I put tape on it and wrap the tape up to the valve cover, and that holds the gasket up in place. So that for example, if I put my finger right here, I can feel that the gasket is just slightly above the outlet of the exhaust. So that way the gasket won't hang down partially into the exhaust and block it. And I've checked that on all 4 outlets. So at this time, I'm going to try to slide this exhaust manifold on these studs and then lower it in place and install it. It's going to be quite a challenge to do this because I've got this blue pipe hanging down, but I've also got that wooden part of the structure of the boat hanging down too, so it's going to get in the way. So this is going to be quite a challenge to do this, but I'll figure it out. All right, I've now installed the exhaust manifold on the starboard side of the engine, and once I do that, I pull the tape out that was holding the exhaust gasket up. So at this time, I'm now about to install the this particular engine has riser extensions, and I'm going to install the riser extensions and then the risers, and install them in the exhaust boots back there on the back. All right, at this time I'm trying to install the long studs that hold this riser extension and elbow on top, and in order to get it in, the bolts have a coating on them, so it's really tough to get them in there. So this coating, that red coating right there, makes it really hard to get them in. So they don't spin by hand, that's for sure. So what I did is I put 2 nuts on back to back. You put the first nut on, turn it down, and I've got the flange turned outward. Obviously I had to put the nut on first and spin it down to get it to free the threads up. But then I threaded this on by hand. Put another nut with the flange down, and then tighten it up against each other, and that gives me something to grab a hold to. And then I use my socket. I use my 9/16 socket, like so, and just tighten them. I had to tighten it. The impact driver is not strong enough to drive this down, so I tightened it by hand till the threads bottom out in the part, and there's no more sealant showing. So that's one stud. I'm now about to do the other 3, and then I'll be able to set the risers on, and the extensions. Well, the extension and then the riser. If you notice, I've got tape covering up the hole just in case I dropped a nut or anything. Didn't want it going down the exhaust. That would be a pretty big nightmare. I don't know if it would get all the way into the cylinder, but it could. So that's a safety precaution to keep stuff out of there. So I'm about to install the other 3 studs, and then I'll put this exhaust together on the port. This is the port side of the engine. Okay, there's this example where it helps to read the instructions. So if you can tell, I noticed that one of these studs is longer than the other ones. So it was the first one I installed, so I didn't notice it until after I got the other two installed. But after reading the directions, there's two long studs in this package, and this one and the one already installed, and they're for remote oil filter. This engine does not have a remote oil filter, so I'm gonna have to take these two long studs are extra. I've already counted and I have a total of 10, so the two long ones are extra. So I'm fixing to take this long one back out and put short ones in it. Put a short one in its place. All right, all four of the riser studs are in, and it took quite a bit of effort to get these in. I ended up using a pneumatic air wrench to dry these down because my electric impact driver couldn't generate enough torque. So at this time I'm about to put the riser extension in the gaskets. And by the way, the instructions say that if you have the type of system where all your water goes from here down to the bottom of the exhaust manifold and then rises and then pumps out, you need to use open riser gaskets. If you have both the hose that goes down and you have a hose that comes up here to the side of the elbow, then you're supposed to use a restrictor between the extension and the elbow. At least that's what the instructions say. But this one, this only has one hose going to the bottom, so it wants free flow all the way out to the exhaust. Since you're going to get, the reason that being is that you're going to get bypass water most of the time, but then when the thermostat opens, you're going to get the water out of the engine and the bypass going through this one hose, so you need the full flow out of the exhaust. But to install the gaskets, the extension, and the elbow, and then tighten everything down. All right, so I've worked one of the, this is an open riser gasket. I worked one of them on the studs, and now I'm about to put the extension on. And the extension goes, get this thing straight down like that. All right, so now the extension's on. It's a 3-inch riser extension for this particular boat. This plug could be oriented up or down. So that I looked at the old one, and this plug is oriented higher. It's on the top rather. It could be on the bottom, but it's oriented on the top. Okay, I was cleaning up the boots and getting the elbow ready and the boot back there to install this elbow. And so I looked down inside the exhaust, and if you notice, there's a flapper in there. Now, in a previous video on Volvo Penta says to take the flappers out, but I put my hand down in there, and the flappers seem to be in pretty good shape, so I'm not going to take them out. I'm going to leave them in there. They help to reduce the amount of water ingestion in the motor when the weight takes over the boat. So I'm leaving those in there. It means there's potentially melted flappers further down in the exhaust. I'm gonna stick my camera on a wire up through the exhaust on the bottom and see if I can see any inside. Because that way because you can't get them out except to the bottom anyway. All right, I've now installed the gasket on the top of the riser extension, and I'm about to set this elbow on the top of that. All right, I've now put the riser elbow on the top and sandwiched two gaskets between the extension. I'm now about to install the nuts and tighten them down. And the instructions say to tighten the nuts down to 33 foot-pounds. So that's what I'm about to do, and then this side will be done, and then I'll put the I decided to go ahead and put this coupling on after I get the riser on, or I get the elbow on, because the elbow is so heavy it's just hard to manage with this thing attached to it. Okay, the port side of the engine's exhaust system is now done. Got the new the manifold, riser extension, the elbow, rubber boot, and then the coupling and another rubber boot, and all the clamps are tight. I'm missing one clamp. This one broke. This clamp right here broke, so I had to buy a mini clamp. Other than that, it's all installed, and I'm gonna move on to the starboard side. It's very important that these clamps are all tightened down properly, and I'm gonna find out what the torque is, but you need to torque these to the right setting, because if you have a leak on this boot, you can sink your boat. This has got to be watertight. It's got to be watertight there. It needs to be watertight. Both these boots, both connections on both boots need to be watertight. The ones up top may not sink the boat, they may leak some water into your bilge, but the bottom ones have the they will definitely sink the boat because that's below the water line. So you got to make sure those are tight and you don't have water coming in. So when you test drive a boat, don't put the cover and all that back on where you can't see these boots when you're test driving to make sure it's not water doesn't come in. Matter of fact, you need to check it as soon as you get the trailer in the water. Don't take it off the trailer until you make sure that water's not coming in those boots. So I'm done with the port side. I'm now about to finish up the I've got 3 of the studs in the starboard side, but I want to get this other side done first. So I'm now about to complete the starboard side, and it's identical to the port side, so I'm not going to do another video or more video of that. Again, the most important part was getting the gaskets between there and there, tighten this thing all down. Like I said, it's got to be tightened to 33 foot-pounds, and then you get your boots on and tightened up. And really the only real easy way to, I won't say easy, but the only proper way to get these boots on is you take your bottom boot loose on both clamps. Obviously the upper clamp wasn't even on, but you loosen your bottom clamp. And what I do is I took this boot off and I cleaned it out with soap and shower and some wire brush, got all the crud out of it, cleaned it off, and then you wipe the inside of it with soap, like maybe Dawn dishwasher liquid or something, so it acts as a lubricant, and you that way it slides up and down on the exhaust horn a little better. So once you get that, you have to slide that coupling or this rubber boot here down all the way onto that horn, so that this coupling here can swing into place. You can hook it up here, and then you rotate it and swing it into place, and then you slide this boot back up onto both the. You slide it back up over this coupling, and you slide it up as far as it'll go till it hits a stop here, and there's another stop on the other side. So, and then once it hits the stops, then you push down on this to make sure it's down on the horn really good, and then you tighten everything up. So that's how you do it. I'm now about to do the starboard side, and then the exhaust will be done on this boat. All right, before I throw the boxes in the trash, I just want to show what the part numbers were. The manifold is part number, this is Sierra, part number 18-1953-2. That was the manifold. They're both the same on both sides. And they come with all the plugs you need, the threaded plugs that seal all the ports and everything. The elbow, they call it a riser, I call it an elbow, but it's Sierra part number 18-1976-2. And that was the elbow that turned out. Both of them are identical on both sides. And then finally there was the, let's see, this was the riser extensions. This is not Sierra, this was Mercruiser. And it was Mercruiser Quicksilver 33320A13. This is 3-inch. This is a 3-inch riser extension kit. So, about to throw those in the trash. But still trying to put the boat together. Should have it running in about 2 hours.